3.
Coming up at 10 minutes before 8 is the time. Come back to our conversation. Kevin, you'll be the next caller. But let's turn to a story that's good news. Young people getting into work through a kickstart job. I'm bringing to the conversation Work and Pension Secretary Thérèse Coffey, who joins me now. Thank you for coming on, Secretary of State. We will talk about the success of that campaign in just a moment. But you won't be surprised to know that possibly first question does have to centre on other areas. Which do you think is more embarrassing for the Prime Minister? The suggestion that he talked about bodies piling up, which he denies, but more people are coming forward and saying it's true, or the Conservative Party having to pay for his makeover of his flat? Which is more embarrassing in your view?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister continues to focus, as he has done since the last 18 months, since the election, on what really matters to people. In terms of, as you say, he denies using those words and is really focused on making sure that we get young people into work, that we're doing our best in terms of aspects of people's health, but also their livelihoods. The Prime Minister has also said he paid for the for the decorations, the extra money that was required. Candidly, my views, when I'm hearing them from people on the doorstep that I'm hearing, is just that people are really excited about the fact we've got over 33 million people who've now had their first vaccine. And it's those sorts of things where I expect people to spend most of our time working on what it is to make their lives as normal again as quickly as possible.
Yes, when you consider a lot of people, sadly, and we're going to talk about the success of the Kickstart job in a moment, but a lot of people lost their jobs. £58,000 to do up a flat. It's excessive, isn't it, Secretary of State?
Well, I think I don't know the details of exactly what has been spent on what. I know that the Prime Minister spent a lot of time.
Let me help you. I've got all the details for you. It's wallpaper at £840 a roll. It's a lily drum table at £3,000. It's a baby bear sofa at £9,800. Shall I go on? I can go through the whole list if you require it.
Well, I was going to say that the Prime Minister has probably spent more time in the number 10 flat than Prime Ministers normally would. Also, the birth of his young son, having his family there. So I think it's no surprise if people with a different sort of family atmosphere moving into a private residence in number 10 want to make changes. And the important thing is that the Prime Minister has said that he's paid for that.
£5,900 on an armchair, Dr. Coffey.
I have absolutely no idea about what the Prime Minister chooses to do in the residence in number 10.
Well, it's a rattan upholstered Venus chair. It's £5,000, and it's just one chair. It's not even as if it's a sofa. £5,900. Would you spend that on a chair?
Well, the point is that the Prime Minister's paid for those. I think it's perfectly acceptable for people to spend their money how they wish
when they're
considering their family
do we know who
in the residence where they spent a lot of time.
Do we know initially who paid?
The only information I have is that the Prime Minister has paid for that. I have no other knowledge of that.
Bit embarrassing, though, isn't it, when you're here to talk about the success of the Kickstart programme? All anybody really wants to talk about is sleaze. This is the reality, isn't it?
Well, actually, I don't think that's the case. As I say, you've been doing a lot of campaigning out on the doorsteps. The media will choose to focus on whatever it is that they want to focus on.
Okay.
If I think that we're coming to the end of this parliamentary session and how much we've achieved in the last 18 months, as well as tackling coronavirus, we are really focused on trying to do things like help young people, which I know.
Well, let's talk about that, indeed. Yes, you're going to Marks and Spencer's later today. I imagine not to do your shopping, Secretary of State. Or maybe you will do some shopping, Secretary of State, but you're going there for another reason.
Well, I am going there to meet some young people who've started their Kickstart placement with Marks and Spencer's. There are other retailers and indeed many other employers who are part of this programme. We've approved funding for nearly 200,000 jobs, and we're close to starting to see that people actually starting their placement start to ramp up. I think in the last few weeks it's an average of 260 young people per day doing that, and I think this is a real opportunity for that first job where they will also get extra training support in order to help them be ready to apply for what I hope will be their longer term jobs at the end of the Kickstart placement.
Okay. Do we have a number? What is your sort of ultimate goal in the number of jobs that you hope to create here, Secretary of State?
Well, we hope by the end of the year to have given 250,000 young people their opportunity through the Kickstart scheme. We're also conscious that we're helping people in a variety of ways with other different programmes in order to get them on track. we need the economy to fully recover. That's why our cautious approach and on the roadmap is important. And we're seeing it with Kickstart, that as we've gone through April the 12th, as we're looking forward ahead to May and ultimately to June, that employers are coming forward saying, you gave me funding to do this. I'm now ready to start taking these young people on, and we're helping young people try and find the right job to give them that first step.
The cautious approach of which you speak, Secretary of State, was that what we saw at Wembley at the weekend with 8,000 football fans, many of whom, of course, don't know each other, packing into the stadium? That's a cautious approach, is it?
It is a cautious approach. If you think that the capacity of Wembley is about 80,000 people, and people, that's been an important testing pilot about understanding what we can do with these sorts of mass events, the sorts of experiences which people of all ages want to enjoy. So I think it's been a sensible way with the testing beforehand, the testing afterwards, and for us to evaluate exactly what's happened.
I agree.
And those decisions on that will then be made.
And let's see that at theatres and everywhere else. But why still the very tight restrictions for funerals, Thérèse Coffey?
Well, it's very conscious of the limited number that can still go to funerals as it stands. The pilot events are there to try and help us understand how the vaccine is still potentially transmitting.
But I'm sorry, what might take place at a
funeral
people that is not going to take place at a football match? Because people hug each other, sadly, to commiserate a loss at a funeral. People hug each other when goals go in. Total strangers hug each other when goals go in at football, as I'm sure you're aware. People aren't even allowed to sing, but if they were, people sing. I cannot for the life of me see what takes place at a funeral that is not in some way replicated at a football match.
Well, the football matches pilot test event are on a mass scale. It's not the standard practice for other organised sports events. But I do know this is under careful consideration for the next step. The cabinet committees will be meeting to discuss the evidence of what has been happening on general transmission in the wider community.
But meanwhile, more people die, sadly, every day. More funerals take place, and people can't say goodbye to grandma. So you and your colleagues sit around, you run pilots, you have committee meetings, you have meetings about meetings, people die, and relatives can't go to the funerals. Surely action this day is appropriate on this one.
Well, that's why action is undertaken in assessing the data on a daily basis. The vaccinations are continuing to roll out. As I say, over 60% of adults have had their first dose. Nearly 13 million people have had both doses. We know that really helps in trying to reduce the transmission and the impact of people who get the virus. And I know that this particular issue is under careful consideration for the next step of the roadmap, which is due to come in the next few weeks.
OK, let's conclude finally. Can you, Secretary of State, honestly think of anything that happens in a funeral that doesn't happen in that sports stadium as regards people mixing? You can't, can you?
Well, in terms of particularly the Wembley event, I think it's about 10% of the capacity. Careful judgments have been made along the way to.
You saw the
photo? I didn't actually.
Well, you didn't see newspapers?
Because I didn't support either the clubs.
No, but you saw. I imagine
playing.
You had sight of newspapers yesterday which had pictures of fans, obviously wearing their respective teams' shirts. And I put it to you lastly, what could have happened at Wembley that would not happen? What could have happened at a funeral that would not have happened at Wembley? And there's nothing, is there, Secretary of State? Nothing.
Well,
no,
as I say, there's a big pilot event with 10% of capacity that was being assessed. That's why there are certain limits placed on number of people who can attend a church or a service in order to try and keep that social distancing. But it's important that we make appropriate judgments, and that's why I think the consideration of numbers attending funerals is actively being considered right now, in line with our preparation for the next step on the roadmap. All
right, I'm grateful for your time. I hope the trip goes well, and good luck with your Kickstart programme, and good luck when you go to that store, of course, to herald the success of that. Thérèse Coffey, who is Work and Pension Secretary, appearing here on LBC. Look, a lot of you want to have your say about is Boris Johnson on the ropes. Even as I'm saying this, I'm working out how we can come back to that. So I assure you, if you've not got through or have not read your email, please don't worry, we will get to that. But the music means the conversation will move on. And coming up in the next hour, we look at two conditions that sadly, it would appear, have grown while the NHS understandably is focused on COVID.